Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you had a good weekend. Thanks for joining us. Legalized tampering in full swing and underway. Also, news that the Browns and Andrew Berry already at work. Scott Petrak confirms that the Browns are giving up a 5th and a 6th round pick to acquire Jerry Jeudy from the Denver Broncos, team that they tried to get Jerry Jeudy from last year and were turned down. Second round pick they turned down. But in the trade, Browns are giving up number 135, 5th round, number 202, 6th round. They also have 155 in the 5th and 205 in the 6th, but they are keeping those. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. And Scott, again, they tried to get Judy at the trade deadline. They've tried a couple of times. It was a 2nd round pick I think they wanted. So it's not a guy that has lived up to the draft status of the 15th overall pick. But we've been talking about 5th and 6th round picks and how people are trying to get rid of them, and Andrew Berry got a receiver with a high upside, I guess, would be the way to talk about it.
Yeah, no doubt. Former 1st round pick, right? Top 15 guy. Good route runner, quick. The deep speed. I think he ran a 4.46 at the combine. So he can run, but I think he's quicker than fast. Had some drop issues, had some injury issues. Seems to talk a lot. He kind of got into that thing with Steve Smith Sr., who criticized him. He could hear the criticism from him and on social media and reacted to that. But, I think he's a guy with a lot of potential. Played at Alabama under Nick Saban. I remember talking to Amari Cooper a couple years ago, and he called Judy one of the best route runners in the league, and he was young then. So I think it makes a lot of sense when you need a receiver like the Browns did. The free agent market was thin. To go and get a guy like Judy without having to give up much, right? You said the 5th and 6th rounders. Not that they're throwaways, but Andrew Berry likes to stockpile them so he can make deals like this. And it's, like everybody says, it's low risk, high reward.
Yeah, and the 5th and 6th rounders this year in particular, there are fewer underclassmen, and there are more people going for the 5th and 6th year of eligibility in college, so that those later round things have been compressed and squashed. Brad Spielberger, Pro Football Focus, tweets this out. It's really interesting. Brad was on the show last week. Since 2022, Judy is one of 5 players with double-digit receptions, gaining 40-plus yards. Tyreek Hill is number 1 with 16. No surprise there. Amari Cooper is number 2. Rashid Shaheed of the Saints, Mike Evans of the Buccaneers, and then Jerry Jeudy. So 2 home run threats for Kevin Stefanski and the Browns. And the flip side of that is Deshaun Watson likes throwing the deep ball when he's healthy.
Yeah, he certainly does. Now, it's hard to tell if those 40-yarders come on go routes or they catch and runs. Either way, you want that explosion, the explosive element from your receivers. And I think that's been lacking a little bit the last couple of years, especially outside of Cooper. I think Judy's had his most success on those in-breaking routes, the deep crosses, just the in routes. And, but I'm sure he can get pretty deep. He's got that speed like we talked about. I think being around Amari Cooper, another Alabama guy, is going to be good for Judy. He's unless the Browns extend him before the season, which I'm not sure why they would, then he's playing on that contract year. So you expect to get the best out of him. And again, this is a guy with a lot of talent. An All-American at Alabama, a couple 1,000-yard seasons at Alabama, a really good route runner. So I think there's reason to believe that he can add elements to this offense that were needed.
Yeah, the thing that's kind of interesting is nationally when you hear it, and I'm referring to this, take a look at this tweet. Adding Jerry Jeudy puts even more pressure on Deshaun Watson to finally give the Browns a return on their massive investment in guaranteed cash and draft picks. And I've heard that nationally last couple of days since the trade was announced. I don't see it that way. What I see is the Browns are they're kind of doubling down and trying to go and give Watson every opportunity to succeed. And I'm guessing if I'm Deshaun Watson, that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave. To me, the pressure is already there, right? I mean,
Yep.
It's year 3 of a 5-year deal, making a ton of money, and he gave up a ton of picks. I think Deshaun Watson is smart enough and realistic enough that he knows this is, I really don't think it's too much to call it a make or break year. That's how it feels like it. I mean, I know we're March, the season's 6 months away, but it feels like if Deshaun Watson doesn't live up to his former form in Houston, he went to 3 Pro Bowls, the trade, all of that. If he doesn't live up to that in the season, then you start talking about exit strategies. Do they need to move on? That type of thing. So I think the pressure was already about as high as it could get, especially coming off a playoff run without him, all those things. So the trade just improves what it should. I mean, that's the goal of the trade, is to improve his chances of success. So, the pressure's on him, but this trade doesn't amp it up, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it as well. So former Browns wide receiver, longtime voice of the Denver Broncos, Dave Logan, was on the Ken Carman Show with Anthony Lima. Talked about what the Browns are getting in Jerry Jeudy and what he's seen.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Jerry Jeudy is a finished product and calling all of his games. I've seen greatness on the field. What I've seen is an inconsistent player. I've seen a guy that has certainly a good enough skill set to be a productive wide receiver in the league. He's an excellent route runner. He's had problems staying healthy, number one, and he's not been as consistent a ball catcher as I would like to see. I think he has shown some immaturity in terms of social media stuff. And again, he would not be the first guy nowadays. He wouldn't be the only guy either. But, guys today, and I think Jerry from time to time I would put in this category, they maybe they don't understand it as much as we would like to have them understand it. Your brand is the team you play for, right? Your brand is not your social media brand, right? The messages you deliver through social media. So your brand is the team, and when the team has success, then your brand is going to take off. Judy has had a couple of dust-ups here in town.
And he also referenced the one you mentioned with Steve Smith. And it's an interesting perspective. It's a guy that understands what it takes to be successful as a receiver in the NFL.
Sure, and he's still young, right? Maybe it's stuff you grow out of. Obviously, not enough to dissuade the Browns from trading for him. And I talked to somebody from Denver, and I asked if he was a pain in the butt, and they said no. That not any more than an average receiver. Thought he was a good guy. So I think the Browns are willing to, give him a fresh start, and maybe that's what he needs, right? Whether it's the new quarterback, new play callers, new head coach, whatever it is, new city, that Judy might have the chance to prosper here.
Yeah, guys with talent will get opportunities, and he definitely has talent without question. All right, as you might guess, a lot of people want to talk about this. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Hi, this is Rico. Can we investigate Andrew Berry for being a mastermind thief? No, I'm just joking. But in all seriousness, Berry once again waited till he got his man for his price, not the other team's asking price. I'm not a huge fan of Judy, but for that compensation, you can't be mad at all. He does have above average route running, and now with his Alabama alumni in Cooper, he can learn even more. I applaud Berry for being able to acquire talented wide receivers for a low cost. I'm just calling in to give AB his much deserved flowers. Now, where is that extension? Thanks. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. You know what? We were looking at this before, Scott. So Amari Cooper, I think, was the 4th pick in the draft. Judy's the 15th. Elijah Moore is, I believe, the 32nd. So you've got 3 wide receivers, varying degrees, first, early, second-round talent. And the most you've given up is a pick swap. You've given up a 5th, a 6th, and a pick swap where you moved back, I think it was 32 spots or 23 spots.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's how they built the top of the receiver position, right? The receiver room. And, I think a lot of that speaks to, well, it's multiple things. Andrew Berry's willingness to explore different options, the Haslam's willingness to pay guys, right? I mean, Dallas didn't want to pay Amari Cooper anymore. Denver didn't want to pay Jerry Jeudy, so you give up low-round picks and you get, contracts back. And then they also kind of had their hand forced by missing in the draft, right? They missed with Anthony Schwartz. It might be too early to tell about David Bell, but I mean, he hasn't had a huge impact in his 2 years. Those are both third-round picks. And then we'll see what happens to Cedric Tillman, the third-round pick a year ago. But when you don't have that influx through the draft at a position, especially one as important as receiver, you got to figure it out a different way. So you can kind of give Barry low marks for how the Browns have drafted receivers, but then I think you have to give him high marks for how he's compensated by trading for these guys.
Yeah, the curious thing along those lines is Barry hasn't taken anybody higher than the third round, a receiver. It's been Schwartz, Tillman, and Bell all in the third round. Well, this is kind of interesting as well. News from in the division. T. Higgins has requested a trade per sources. Higgins loves Cincinnati, hoped to be with the team long-term. Disappointed that the team has not had any talks about a long-term contract extension since March of 2023. They put the tag on him, but did not talk long-term contract extension. So you got Chase that's coming up. So it's interesting.
It is, and you never know how that's going to play out, right? We've seen David Njoku request a trade. We saw Kareem Hunt here request trades. They weren't dealt. I know there are a couple guys in Cincinnati. I think Von Bell had requested a trade. Maybe Jonah Williams last year after they went out and got Orlando Brown Jr. So, guys can request trades, but they don't have a whole lot of leverage, right? If you don't play, you don't get paid. So, maybe Higgins doesn't report to the offseason program. Maybe he tries to hold out, and he can do that without signing the tag, I think, so he wouldn't get fined or anything. But the Bengals have most of the cards, and we'll have to see. If they get the offer that they want, then sure, they'll ship him. But I don't think they're just going to give away T. Higgins. But, maybe a week ago it felt like, okay, Cincinnati's going to have at least their top two receivers back, and now it feels maybe a little bit less likely.
Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com and I. Going to step aside, take a quick time out. Christian Wilkins has signed. We'll tell you what that means for the Browns. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Go ahead and pop a clamp on that.
Let's take 5.
With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, like this new $20 100X with its $1 million grand prize. I want to get my cut of that 76% payout.
So, good news. We're playing the largest family of scratch-offs ever. These Lady Lucks have all the fun and no complications.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. The first day of legalized tampering, so teams can talk contracts. Agreements are being reached. None of them become final, formal, whatever you want to say, till the beginning of the league year, Wednesday at 4. Christian Wilkins, though, he got paid. 4 years, $110 million base value deal includes $84.75 million guaranteed. It is with the Los Angeles Raiders. That's according to Adam Schefter. So it comes out to about $27.5 million a year for 4 years. Now, what does that mean relative to the Browns? Well, it could mean that they turn their attention to a guy that the 49ers decided to not come to a long-term deal with over the weekend. Jordan Schultz reports that Eric Armstead has decided to become a free agent. He was released over the weekend. Armstead, 6-tackle, 1-sack performance in the Super Bowl, ranks 4th in playoff sacks among all active players. 8 playoff sacks, ranks 2nd all-time in franchise history. they're going to have to get pieces along that defensive line just because they had a bunch of one-year deals. Armstead's an intriguing guy. Your thoughts on him potentially kind of slotting in inside there?
Yeah, he is interesting, right? They have a big-time line in San Francisco. They played a similar scheme, I think, to what the Browns do. They like to attack, right? They build it around that front four, like Jim Schwartz does. Obviously winning pedigree out there. So I like the idea of that. I'm not sure what the market will be. But there's other guys out there. I really like the idea of Wilkins. I wrote last night that I thought that should be the Browns' plan is to go get him. Now, I thought they might be able to get him for $22 million a year. And it turns into $27.5. That's a big jump, right? When you're kind of salary cap strapped a little bit, you're paying a bunch of other players. That's real. Let's call it $5 million difference a year. That's real, right? Is that 2-3 players, depending? So I understand why Andrew Berry pulled back. We saw the same thing last year, right? Javon Hargrave, they were interested in him at D-tackle. And he got a bunch of money. He went to San Francisco, too. And they wound up turning their attention to Dalvin Tomlinson. So I expect him to do the same, whether it's Armstead, whether it's Sheldon Rankins from Houston, is it DJ Reader of Cincinnati. I think they should go after someone with some pass rush ability, which is what was attractive about Wilkins. He had 9 sacks last year, and you showed the Armstead stuff, the sack numbers from the playoffs. So that's the kind of tackle I think they should go after because they're trying to turn that front four into the best in the league. It was pretty close last year, but I think there is room for growth.
All right, developing market to watch, and this involves the Browns. This again from Aaron Wilson, NFL. Zach Moss, interest from the Texans, Titans, Packers, and Browns per league sources. So Wilson, Wilson reporting Moss in the Browns potentially. And Moss is one of those guys that isn't expected to, break the bank, but was really productive.
I was impressed by him. Jonathan Taylor was hurt at the beginning of last year, so Moss filled in. Had some big games. Watched him on film preparing for the Browns-Colts matchup and really liked him. So, the Colts chose Taylor. They paid Taylor a bunch of money, which allows Moss to hit the market. And I'm not saying he is Jonathan Taylor because, I think the Colts probably made the right move there. But can he be a good complement to Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong Jr. and depending on when Nick Chubb is ready? Yeah, I really liked what I saw out of Moss. I think he'll come in from a salary perspective way lower than some of the deals we're seeing for Barkley and Pollard and Swift and those guys signing right away. So I could see that. I could also see the Browns waiting until the draft and going young there. But if they're going to sign a free agent, I like the idea of Moss. I thought he played really well last year.
All right, so you mentioned Barkley. So Saquon Barkley has reportedly agreed to terms with the Eagles. Now that 46.75 is including incentives, so his base is 3 years, 3.75, a little over $12 million. You mentioned DeAndre Swift. That's 3 years, $24 million, 15.3 guaranteed. Pollard, same deal, 3 years, $24 million guaranteed to the Titans. And Devin Singletary has agreed to a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. So with the Giants, so they replace him with that. So that's a little over 5.5. You're looking at. Now it's pretty important to keep in mind, those Swift and Pollard and even Singletary numbers, because I would imagine that's kind of a point where the Browns will look to renegotiate with Nick Chubb at the base and then give him the incentives to get back any type of that money. It'll probably be along the lines of what the middle-of-the-road free agent guys are getting. It'll be interesting to see. You could see that negotiation beginning around those numbers.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, like you said, Dave, because I don't know how they're going to address it because he's coming off such – a devastating knee injury, so serious, required 2 surgeries. I don't think he'll be ready week 1. So how do you handle that? And you're right. Don't put a bunch of incentives in that let him get close to or could even let him reach what he was scheduled to make, right, which is 14-ish. But what's that base, right? I don't know. I mean, 8 feels kind of high to me, but that's where the second-tier guys are. So, I don't know. I'm sure the Browns would want to go under that. I don't know if Chubb will hold out for at least that. And the Browns, then do they acquiesce and settle on something like $8 million with, 6 in incentives? That's going to be interesting because he's way bigger. I know he's Nick Chubb and how great he's been, but he's a way bigger question mark than all these guys because he's coming off this injury. We don't know when he'll be ready. I think the other thing worth noting is Barkley's probably going to be the top of the market, right, for all these running back free agents. At least that's what I would assume. So if he's 12 plus, that's still less than what Chubb would have made in what Chubb's annual salary was in that contract he signed years ago. So I think that speaks to the market, and Chubb's going to get caught in that depressed running back market.
Yeah, and again, the Browns will, just in listening to Andrew Berry, they're going to give Nick Chubb the benefit of the doubt in negotiations. Doesn't mean they're going to give him a boatload of money, but they want to treat him the way they feel he should be treated. This is also kind of interesting. So Russell Wilson plans on signing a 1-year deal with the Steelers. Team-friendly league minimum, as the Broncos will end up paying $38 million of his salary while he plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Wilson to the Steelers. So you got Jackson, Wilson, Watson in the division with Burrow. Yeah. So welcome to the AFC North, huh?
Yeah, I think it's something to see that Russell Wilson move because he isn't the same player he was in Seattle, but his numbers are still really good. Like the interception or touchdown interception ratio is near the top of the league. So he still doesn't turn it over. We saw, I was in Denver last year for that Browns loss. He could still make plays with his legs. And he hurt the Browns more with his legs than he did with his arm. He can still throw the ball deep, and the Steelers have some deep targets. I think he's an upgrade over Kenny Pickett, right? So if you looked at Steelers, you go, well, then their biggest deficiency is quarterback. Now, I still think Wilson ranks 4th in the AFC North quarterbacks, but he's a big jump from Kenny Pickett with their defense and with what should be a better running game with Arthur Smith as coordinator. All of a sudden, I feel like the Steelers are more dangerous, and especially in the playoffs. They got to the playoffs last year. You knew they weren't going to beat anybody. I'm not predicting them to win the division. I just think Russell Wilson stays healthy, fits in with Arthur Smith. I think he's going to improve that Steelers team.
Yeah, think about the Freiermuth, the tight end. You play action with Freiermuth, and George Pickens. He's probably the happiest guy in Pittsburgh right now.
Right, and they're going to run it a bunch, right? Arthur Smith runs it a bunch, so you're going to run it a ton. That helps your defense, shortens games, and then maybe you need Russell to make 3 deep throws a game, and we've seen him do that. Throw the ball up to Pickett, let him go try to make Pickens, let him go try to make a play. So I like the move for Pittsburgh. I wonder if all along they acted like Pickett was going to be the guy, and then they had a change of heart. I don't know if they just were saying that about Pickett at the time, but you couldn't have gone into next season with Kenny Pickett and thought that the Steelers were going to be legitimate North contenders, and I think you can start to think that way with Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a huge upgrade for the Steelers, and pains me a little bit to say that, but their quarterback position just got upgraded. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. One free agent each team shouldn't re-sign, plus take a look at Andrew Berry's free agent signings of $5 million plus. It's not a great list. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Patrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. This one from the Bleacher Report. One free agent each team shouldn't re-sign. They say the Browns should not re-sign Jordan Elliott. Elliott has consistently been available, and that's legitimate. Plus, still he's not a dominant run stopper, rarely makes a pass rushing impact. Taking a swing on a rookie is a fine option instead of paying his second contract. Scott, free agency, Jordan Elliott, everything. Tell me what the price is. I thought he made a step forward. Last year was really the first time I thought he was a competent NFL defensive lineman for the most part last year.
I agree with you. There were signs, right? And I don't know if it's a Colts game or right around there, early mid-season. Probably played his best game as a Brown, had a sack or two, was in the backfield a bunch. Jim Schwartz raved about him. Then it felt like he cooled off after that. I had a good interview with him before 2022, and then during 2023, after he was playing well. I really liked talking to the kid. He had doubts about himself coming off of 2022, and then felt better about himself while he was playing well in 2023. But you can't commit big dollars to him. I don't think he'll get big dollars anywhere. But if he gets a multi-year deal somewhere else, the Browns need to let him go. If they can get him back cheap for a year, that's fine. He's a young guy, like they mentioned. He plays a lot, right? He's available. So he's just a guy that, the Browns drafted him in the third round. He's, just been a guy for them. And I think they have other options. But again, that's a position of need, right? They need to go get, a starter and then another at least one or two backups. And it probably speaks to him that they're not willing to give him that type of deal.
All right, so Jack Duffin, Orange and Brown Report, tweets this out. Andrew Berry's $5 million plus additions in free agency. Top of the list, Dalvin Tomlinson, 14.5. Jack Conklin, $14 million. John Johnson, $11.25 million. Austin Hooper, $10.5 million. Jadeveon Clowney, $8 million. Juan Thornhill, $7 million. Okenronko, $6.3. Case Keenum, $6 million. Two players over $5 million average annual per year. Measure expectations accordingly. That as good as Andrew Berry has been with trades, some of the free agent things haven't worked out. It goes to show free agency is it's a tough thing.
I think that is the bottom line, and everybody gets excited about it. I fall into it. Oh my gosh, they can improve the roster if they go get players X, Y, and Z. And not that it never happens, but I bet more times than not, you sign a guy and he doesn't live up to the contract because they're inflated, right? And they're available. Most guys are available because their teams decided not to re-sign him, right? Every team makes a decision. And we talked about Christian Wilkins. I thought the Browns should have gone after him. But the Dolphins chose not to re-sign him, chose not to put the franchise tag on him because they had other priorities. And I think that is an indicator that, hey, this guy's not a perfect player, whoever it is, right? So free agency can be risky. If you have roster holes, it's one way to fill them, and it's a quick way to fill them, and it excites everyone, but it's full of pitfalls. And I looked at that class or that list, and 2020, Andrew Berry was kind of up against it. He inherited, the roster, he inherited the team. They had a huge need of tight end, and they kind of wasted on Austin Hooper. Conklin's been fine. So there's a couple hits in there. But yeah, it's not impressive. And I think he'll probably follow the same thing this year, where there's two guys that get over $5 million, and then they fill in around that.
Yeah, and some of the one-year deals, look back at last year. Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst before he got hurt. Those were really good signings. And again, I think that as he's gone along, Andrew Berry is that's why this is the price, and he doesn't generally go above it. What do you think some areas that he might be looking to spend a little bit more in free agency this year? What are some positional things?
Yeah, we talked about D-tackle. I think the end is included in that too, whether it's Darius Smith coming back or going to get somebody else. And Jonathan Grenard from Houston, I think, was a guy that interested the Browns, and he went and signed with Minnesota for way more than I thought. I want to say it's 4 years, 76. We're talking $19 million.
Yes.
I think Spotrac had him at $13 million. I mean, that's way more than what the market seemed to bear out for him. So, if Barry got involved in that, he probably got out awfully quickly because his former assistant GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa went and paid big bucks for him. But I think they'll have to get a DN somewhere, whether it's bringing back Zadarius Smith, whether it's, obviously it's not Grenard anymore, but there's other guys out there that you could get. Is it a trade for Khalil Mack, right? That would really shake things up. But it's D-tackle, DN, and then I think you shift to backup quarterback, which we talked about a ton. You need a linebacker or two, whether that's Taki or Anthony Walker Jr., a number 2 tight end, punter, right? So, then it gets to kind of those down-the-list positions. But at the top are D-line, backup quarterback, and then linebackers, how I'd rank them.
So this is from Pro Football Focus. Potential landing spots for top remaining free agents. They go offensive tackle Trent Brown to the Cleveland Browns. Browns, stonewalls, defenders, and pass protection, comfortable playing on either side of bookend line of scrimmage. Adds value as teams shuffle things around to get their best 5 on the field amid in-season injuries. That would surprise me if they signed they've got 3 starting tackles. I don't know why they'd want a 4th.
I was going to say, people keep wanting to give him tackles, right? All these national people. Jed Wills, Jack Conklin, and DeJuan Jones, right? They're going to have to figure those 3 guys out. Maybe they draft a young guy, right? They have James Hudson. I could see him drafting. I could see him drafting in the interior, too, right? They need to get younger. They need an influx. There's going to be turnover across that line at some point soon. But signing a free agent tackle that expects to start doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and another guy that was on that list, Danico Autry, has signed with the Texans. So that was a guy that people were connecting the dots because Jim Schwartz, he has kind of replaced Grenard, who signed with the Vikings. Scott Petrak and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. 3 moves the Browns will make after trading for Jerry Jeudy. That's straight ahead. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. This one from Dog Pound Daily. 3 moves the Browns will make after trading for Jerry Jeudy. Number 3, they say restructure Deshaun Watson's contract. Everybody's kind of waiting for that. We'll see. Number 2, figure out the wide receiver room beyond 2024. And number 1, shop a high-priced offensive lineman. All right, regarding the wide receiver room, so Judy will be playing on his 5th-year option, $12.9 million. Elijah Moore's rookie contract is up after this year. He was a second-rounder, so there's no 5th-year option. And Amari Cooper's contract voids after this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to take the temperature of what it might look getting another year or 2 of Amari Cooper. He's been that good.
Yeah. I don't think they'll do anything, and I don't know this, I'm just guessing, that they'll do anything until we get into the season, right? Amari Cooper's turning 30. It's dangerous to pay receivers when they get to that age and commit to them for a long time. Could they go year for year or, year by year with Cooper? That would make sense. He was still highly productive this year. Huge in that locker room, big presence. Obviously, you want him back this year, but you got to keep evaluating that every year, maybe a 2-year deal, after this season. The other couple of guys, you have to see how they played this year. Are they worth committing to, and for how much money? If Judy plays great and lives up to the number 15 pick in the draft, then he becomes the number 1 receiver. You pay him that kind of money, and then you figure out after. But if he and Moore have the kind of same years they've been having, you can have a huge turnover in that room where in 2025 March, we're talking about the Browns going after the number 1 receiver on the market, right? Like, I think there's so much variance that could happen in the next 12 months.
So, having said that, and looking at what that room looks like, do you think the trade for Judy prohibits them or dissuades them from taking a wide receiver in the second round?
A little bit. I don't think it rules it out by any stretch, right? Because the uncertainty beyond 2024. If you have a guy you love that is sitting there at 54 or wherever you wind up drafting, taking your first guy in the draft, get him. So you can have at least a foundation, right? You could say that guy and Cedric Tillman, we know will be here. We'll figure out the rest later. So I wouldn't rule it out. Having said that, they feel like the top 4 is pretty set. Cooper, Judy, Moore, Tillman. So I think what's more realistic is the Browns go get a receiver in the 4th, 5th round and hope they catch lightning in the bottle.
What other positions do you think might be more pressing in round 2, given, we kind of know what the strengths of this draft are?
Sure. Let's say they don't sign a big money D-tackle, right? Is Mason Smith from LSU. He's a guy that I talked to at the Combine and liked. Highly recruited, right? Might have been one of the top guys coming out of his recruiting class. Had some issues at LSU, but a big dude, likable, had some success at LSU, coming off an injury. I think he played well coming off of that. Chris Jenkins from Michigan, his dad played in the league. Like, there's going to be some guys at 54 that are intriguing. And you have Tomlinson. You have Ika, who you took in the 3rd round, right? Maybe you re-sign Mo Hurst and or Shelby Harris. So, I think you could patch it together without that big money guy if you take a guy at 54 and think this guy's got a bunch of upside. In the end, I keep coming back to the same positions because the Browns are pretty set. I think they need a running back at some point, whether it's free agency or the draft. We talked about they need a number 2 tight end. I wouldn't be, if they went and said, hey, we think that tight end at 54 is a really good alternative. We can kind of consider him a receiver, but he can be the number 2 to Njoku. I could buy into that, right? But to me, it's about the front. It's about the D-line and receiver. Those are still the spots that draw my attention the most.
It's kind of interesting. So we've talked a little bit about Ika, a little bit about Tillman. Those are both 3rd-round picks. On good teams, playoff teams, 3rd-round picks have a tough time getting onto the field. So I know Browns fans are kind of used to, well, we picked this guy in the 3rd round. Why haven't we seen him? What's wrong with him? He's playing in front of us. In the instance of Siaki Ika, now he got to play later in the year and it wasn't as good as you would have liked, but he was playing behind Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, who were having pretty good years. So I guess what I'm saying, we don't know what Siaki Ika is going to be this year.
You don't, and I think you have to remember that when we talk about all these free agent moves. Now, it doesn't mean they're not interested in the tackle, because I fully think that they were interested in Christian Wilkins. But if they reset and say, hey, we have Dalvin Tomlinson we paid a lot of money for. They invested in Ika with a 3rd-round pick. I can see how the Browns would look at it and go, it's not as drastic a need as maybe I think it is, right? And, the receiver is the same to some degree. I mean, they just went and got Judy, so we know that they needed to address it. But they probably like Tillman better than people on the outside, right? I'm sure they like Bell better than people on the outside. So I do think you have to factor that in. But your point's well taken. I mean, Ika was behind Tomlinson, Elliott, Hurst, and Harris, right? He didn't get on the field until one of those guys got hurt, until Maurice Hurst got hurt. It was the first time Ika got on the field. And, part of that is he probably wasn't ready, and part of that is there were a bunch of good guys in front of him.
Yeah, and you know what? The front office and the coaching staff have gotten very patient, much to the chagrin of the fan base sometimes. I mean, Scott, you and I have been covering the team for there were times where 2 years in, 3rd-round picks were like, oh, it's time to move on. they let them. They try to develop them and exhaust that now.
Yeah, and I think that's a good trait to have, the patience. Now, part of it might be stubbornness, right? They drafted a guy and they're not going to let him go, and we saw that, even with the lower round picks, right? This guy's going to make the roster because he's a draft pick. Now that's changed, but for a while that's how Andrew Berry was. He just didn't cut his draft picks. But I appreciate that patience. But it wears out at some point, right? We saw with Anthony Schwartz. The Browns gave him as many chances as they could, then they were done. And, Tillman's not even close to there. I thought Tillman showed some positive things last year. David Bell showed a couple things, but he just isn't special in any one area, right? So you have to balance that. You have to give these guys a chance to develop, mature, and all that. And then you have to say, can this guy help me now in the future? And if he can't, then it's time to move on.
Scott Patrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Thanks so much for the time and insight. Appreciate it very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Patrick, make sure you check him out. Brownzone.com on the internet. Really good Brown stuff all the time. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Here comes the rush.
All right, everybody, let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $10 Lady Luck 50X. It's got prizes all the way up to $500,000, so you could really clean up.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to $20. They're an easy way to cook up some fun.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys. Just wanted to comment on the Browns with their move that they made. That was a pretty good move to go ahead and get that guy, Jerry Jeudy, and that's one receiver down. We still need another hybrid-like receiver, and so when I was looking at the draft, I figured maybe the Browns could probably pick Troy Franklin and Malachi Corley. Troy Franklin would have been Jerry Jeudy. But now that that's taken up, I would go ahead and get Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley is a receiver that is like a running back. And he would be our Debo, and he'd solve 2 problems. He'd be a third receiver, but he'd also be, a third running back. And if you look, the guy is great. So I'm hoping the Browns are at least considering that. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, Corley, Malachi Corley, he's interesting. Do you think the trade for Judy kind of moves them off of a receiver in round 2?
Maybe. I think if you're going to take a receiver, maybe you'd be more inclined, because you have Jerry Jeudy now, to kind of take a guy who maybe needs more development, which actually kind of favors Malachi Corley, because I think him coming into the NFL faces a similar issue to Cedric Tillman, where, at Tennessee, there wasn't a lot of, nuance taught with the route running. And even though Tillman was very productive, you could see that, he had issues with as far as, making sure his route running was clean and those sorts of things. And you could see a lot of similar concerns with Malachi Corley's profile. And I mean, I could definitely see receiver no longer being a true option at 54, because now with Judy, you could have a five wide trio group of Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, and now Jerry Jeudy. You can only have 5 skill players on the field at one time. So where does that leave you with Malachi Corley, for example? I look at Corley, he's a guy that I think he may need a little time, but he's a guy because of his unique ability, maybe not as a gadget receiver, but because he has a Debo-like frame, he compares a lot to Debo. Use him in those situations, get him the ball quickly. He's a guy who can turn a 2 or 3 yard catch into about a 10 to 15 yard play. And he does that. He did that pretty regularly at Western Kentucky. So that to me would make sense, especially because you probably are going to have a decision next year about whether to keep Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, and Jerry Jeudy. You're probably not going to keep all 3 of them. So having another guy in the pipeline heading into year 2 in 2025, that's why I still think receiver might make some sense there. It just depends on the right guy.
All right, this from ESPN.com. Trade grades for Jerry Jeudy. They say the Browns a B. They give the Broncos a C. Judy, who turns 25 in April, posted 54 receptions, 758 yards, 2 touchdowns in 2023. Judy will be playing on his 5th-year option deal worth just under $13 million. He will hit free agency after the 2024 season. For the Browns, low-cost investment that could pay off huge for a team that made an improbable playoff run in 2023. Again, you and I have talked about it on the show before. This is the year teams really didn't want those late-round picks because fewer underclassmen declared, and there are more people staying in for a 5th and 6th year option, still relative to COVID and those exceptions.
Yeah, and of course the ladder is running out soon. 2024 class, I think they may be the last ones kind of truly involved in that. We'll see. And I think with, the NIL changes, that could affect it, this year, but maybe less so going into next year because you have those players who decide to stick around an extra season. So this is the year that definitely, if you can move off those 5th, 6th, and 7th, especially those 7th round picks, you do it, because those 7th round picks, maybe more so than in previous years, are guys you're just, you probably would have taken as UDFAs, or you would have tried to bring into camp on a tryout or something like that. So that's why I think this grade of a B for Jerry Jeudy maybe is a little harsh. I mean, it feels like a no-risk, potentially high-reward move as far as, Jerry Jeudy's a guy who I think could certainly be a quality number 2 receiver. I mean, even looking at his numbers, 750-plus yards, per season. Hasn't had a lot of touchdowns, just 11 over the course of his 4 seasons. You could attribute some of that to the fact that the Broncos did not have great quarterback play during his 4 seasons. You would imagine Deshaun Watson is going to be probably the most one of the arguably the most talented quarterback that Jerry Jeudy has played with in the NFL. Obviously, Watson has to stay healthy and recover off the shoulder surgery, but you would imagine if he does that, then Jeudy, kind of slots in well, and he has the speed element that the Browns just, you can't have enough of. And getting a young receiver like that, kind of on essentially a prove-it deal this year, seems like a pretty no-risk, high-reward move.
Yeah, so some other free agent news. Browns will be losing one of their special teams aces as the Houston Texans have agreed to a 2-year, $4.5 million deal with Mike Ford, defensive back who really good special teams player. So, man, the Texans stole one of Bubba Ventrone's special teams guys.
Well, if I remember right, isn't their special teams coach one of Bubba's assistants from Indianapolis? Yeah, I remember, obviously learning that from the Christmas Eve game, and they had the kick return for a touchdown, which was their highlight of that game before, turning around the wild card game. But, we saw, the turnaround the Browns special teams had last year, and Bubba Ventrone played a big part in that. Mike Ford, I thought he was very good on special teams. Also had an interception of Lamar Jackson in that, comeback win in Baltimore. We all talk about Deshaun Watson, going perfect in the second half, but they got a couple picks off Lamar. Ford had one of them. So it's a key piece that you're kind of losing on special teams. You don't really think about it too much, until you need those guys. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how they go replacing. Certainly a lot of options out there. It's easier to replace, key special teamers than it is, higher end guys. It's still a little bit of a tough loss for Bubba Ventrone's unit.
All right, this from yardbarker.com. 3 free agents the Browns should target this year. They go with Joe Flacco. Flacco was the savior of the Browns' 2023 season, 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, leading them to the playoffs. Healthy Deshaun Watson expected to return in 2024. But Cleveland must have a contingency plan. Marquise Brown. Browns didn't have a wide receiver eclipse 650 yards receiving in 2023 other than Amari Cooper. Of course, the trade for Jerry Jeudy lessens that likelihood. Cleveland has to find a reliable number 2 to complement Cooper. And they say Devin White had a bit of a down year in 2023, posting 83 tackles. 2.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 6 passes defended. Is expected to receive a 2-year, $21.5 million contract. There's no way they're going to spend $10 million on a linebacker. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah will be the linebacker that gets paid at some point. Let's talk a little bit about Flacco. It'll be interesting to see. So the Patriots traded Mac Jones. So the conventional wisdom is they're going to take a quarterback at 3. It might be Brissett. It might be Flacco as a bridge. The Kirk Cousins is leaving the Vikings. Do they go and try to get a veteran? They're starting to become some of these openings. It'll be interesting to see where Joe Flacco ends up.
Yeah, well, it looks like another one actually kind of went off. Those reports, the Raiders just got apparently are getting Gardner Minshew for a 2-year deal. So that's another, option that's gone. But, with Joe Flacco, I think you saw just at the end of last season just how valuable he was, that experience, that calm at quarterback, a guy who's been there and done that, getting the Browns in the playoffs when it seemed like, it wasn't going to happen, especially after, DTR went down with that injury. They turned to Joe Flacco. He had no idea what to expect. And all of a sudden, he catches fire, and so do the Browns at the end of the season. I think, he's just such a consummate professional. Obviously, he's a guy who wants to start. He's proved he has a little bit left in the tank, but seems like the type of personality that would be a perfect fit as a backup to Deshaun Watson, especially considering if you were able to sign Flacco and Deshaun Watson stays healthy for a long time. What a great resource to have in a guy in Flacco who's won a Super Bowl, who's played so many big playoff games, played against the AFC North for pretty much his entire career, knows exactly what it's like to go into those games and win those type of games. It's an invaluable resource for Deshaun Watson as the Browns hope he can get back on track, clearly.
Yeah, I'm told that the deal for Minshew, 2 years, $25 million. That's a lot of money for a fringe starter, really top-line backup. Tim Bielek and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. We'll talk a little bit about draft and some more about roster building. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
All right, everybody. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $5 25X. It's a nice way to nab up to 150 grand.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to $20. They're an easy way to break into some fun.
We continue talking Browns here with Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, on this first day of legalized tampering. So all kinds of negotiations going on between teams and agents of the free agents. All right, this from Fansided. Perfect trade target for each of the 32 NFL teams. For the Browns, they say Jonathan Allen, defensive tackle for the Commanders. Schwartz defense requires a strong interior defensive line. A duo of Tomlinson and Allen would be one of the best starting fronts in football. Browns would be on the hook for $15.5 million and then $17 over the next 2 seasons. They are manageable cap hits for a great player to keep position. Again, the money that Wilkins got, the money that Chris Jones is getting, there are some younger defensive tackles, Grenard, now Dorrance, they're all getting $15, $17 million. So the price of free agency is again high to begin.
Yeah, and then the other name that we have to mention is Eric Armstead from the 49ers. I mean, he's now on the market. I would if on the Browns, he's a guy I would consider going after, but he's not going to be cheap either. So if you can have the assets to go after Jonathan Allen, who is certainly an extremely talented defensive tackle, I would do that in a heartbeat. You can imagine, just how effective we saw how effective that defensive line could be. Obviously, they got some great play last season out of Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris throughout the season. Jordan Elliott really took a nice step forward in the final year of his rookie deal. But, there's just something, to a line where you could have Myles Garrett and Jonathan Allen on it. They're both two of the best players at their respective positions. Everybody says, you don't want to pass rush right down the middle if you're a quarterback. Jonathan Allen's just such a great disruptive player in the middle. Considering you have to play the run games of the Steelers and the Ravens, that's another reason you want to add him. And you can see why, obviously Christian Wilkins, for 4 years, $110 million, that is a lot of money that he went for. But of course, with the Jerry Jeudy trade, you lose two trade assets that you could have used to get that could have gone potentially for a Jonathan Allen trade. So although a 5th and 6th wouldn't have gotten it done, you'd probably have to dip into the 3rd or 4th round. Of course, the Browns don't have a 4th this year, so might have to dip in the 25 pool if you're going to pull that trade off. But if you do, he could be a really great piece for this defensive front.
This one from Pro Football Focus. Early and late round draft fits for every NFL team. For the Browns, early round fit wide receiver Tez Walker out of North Carolina. Late round fit defensive tackle Tyler Davis from Clemson. Browns are still searching for that vertical threat in their passing offense. Walker brings exactly that to the wide receiver position. 4.36 40. Prove that. Could also add some youth to their interior defensive line. Davis brings a lot of experience. Reliable run defender who can be a good rotational depth piece. With the trade for Judy, the vertical threat isn't he's not quite as fast as Walker, but he is a vertical threat, so that's been lessened somewhat.
Yeah, and I think with Devontae Walker, the question I think we're all going to be wondering is how much higher would he have gone if he had been able to play the first handful of games of the season? Couldn't get the transfer waiver, to play right away. North Carolina only got 8 games, still had almost 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, so almost a touchdown per game for Devontae Walker. Even if you look at his combine stats, he's not just fast. You'll talk about that 4.36 time, 10-yard split of about 1.54. So that's elite burst you're talking about. It's not just long speed with Devontae Walker. He can get to that top gear pretty quickly. And if you have top gear with top end burst and the ability to get there quickly, that's a massive weapon to have in Devontae Walker. And Tyler Davis, Clemson's had a good defense for the last few years. You talk about their struggles they've had on offense over the past several seasons. Their defense has been rock solid, and Tyler Davis has been a big reason for it. Just steady in the middle at defensive front. He's been effective throughout his career. You do have to worry about there is some injury history with him, but I think for me personally, I'm not as concerned about that, guys with injury history, because how many guys have come into the NFL with an injury history and, really have stayed relatively healthy for most of their careers? And then you have the opposite, guys who really never missed a game in college and they get to the NFL and they have a hard time staying on the field. So it's hard. It's just impossible to predict that because of the, collisions in football, how fast they are. Guys are inevitably going to get injured. So I think ultimately you can't really worry about that. But, looking for a late round D tackle, Tyler Davis sticks out as another run stuffing option.
All right, before I let you go, this from the 33rdteam.com. Post-combine mock draft. At 55, they have the Browns going defensive tackle Chris Jenkins from Michigan. Bloodlines. Dad, Chris Jenkins, played with the Panthers. What do you think of Jenkins?
Love the guy. I'm big on NFL bloodlines. I always have been because I think there's something to that. And Chris Jenkins is just an athletic force. There were so many defensive tackles that tested extremely well at the combine, showing that D tackle, is one of the strongest positions this year, especially when you get out of the first round. Jenkins has first round potential. So if he somehow fell to the mid-50s for the Browns, that for me would be a very tough guy to pass on. Already 300 plus pounds, high-end run defender. You kind of need to work with him to teach him some pass rush moves and things like that. But what you would have is a very athletic, energetic defensive tackle who has a great motor. And I think that's something you could say for almost all these top defensive tackles. The motors are great on all these guys. But with Jenkins, experience winning a national championship in the middle of a very stout Michigan defense, like I said, bloodlines, those always matter. If you're not going receiver in the second round, if you're not trading down, one of these good defensive tackles would be there. And for me, like I said, Jenkins probably for me would sneak into the first round. Wouldn't be surprised if he went somewhere in the mid to late 20s. So if he's somehow there at 54, that is either an easy call to make or a guy that'd be very tough to say no to.
Tim Bielik, plain dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day. Tim
Bielik, make sure you check him out. Really good stuff relative to free agency as well as the NFL draft. Make sure you check him out. Cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.